Hello, we come to another weekend thought, and this weekend I want us to think about International Women's Day, which took place earlier in the week. Women's Day makes us think about the achievements of women, particularly in times of inequality, and we still think about some of these struggles today. And I want us to think today about Christian women and their influence. It's something that we often forget about. But two of the most inspirational Christian women that I can think of are Margaret Wilson and Margaret McLaughlin, who are known as the Wigtown Martyrs. These were two Christian ladies. Margaret Wilson was only 18 and Margaret McLaughlin was an elderly lady. And these ladies were very loyal to the Lord Jesus Christ, and they took part in conventicles, Christian meetings, because they were concerned about the protection of the Christian church. At that time, those in authority in the land was asking people to swear that the king was the head of the church. And as we know, the Lord Jesus Christ is the only king and head of the church, and that the temporal or state jurisdiction should not interfere in matters spiritual, and indeed in the religious freedoms and freedom of expression that we have in the Christian church. And these two ladies were basically being daubed in upon for attending these meetings. And indeed they were asked to recant their faith. They were asked to swear allegiance to the king being the head of the church. This took place in 1685, just a few years before things started to settle down with the Glorious Revolution in 1688, and then further settlement in the Scottish Church in 1690. And these women are inspirational because they were martyred. They would not surrender their Christian beliefs and in the spiritual independence of their faith, and they paid the ultimate sacrifice of that in being drowned in the sea between Scotland and England. Some people may say, oh, that was very silly, they should have just said the right things and they would have survived. And indeed they drowned the elderly lady, perhaps hoping that the younger Margaret Wilson would indeed perhaps realise, oh well, I better just say the right thing in their eyes and I will be able to live. But Margaret Wilson and Margaret McLaughlin did the right thing. They were loyal to the Lord Jesus Christ and to his church, and as doing so, they paid that sacrifice. And they did the right thing. And indeed, you could read more about the story in books and online of these two martyrs. But what we learn from this story is that we should put the Lord Jesus Christ and his ways first. These are very difficult things to do because sometimes these things are hard, or sometimes we say, this is now 2022, these values don't count anymore. What harm would it be to say that the king is the head of the church? Well, indeed, they are principles. And the more principled you are, the harder things will be. But ultimately, as we're thinking about in our Bible study, how can we glorify God? And in glorifying God, we put him first, we make him prominent in our lives, and indeed that may indeed result in ridicule, or indeed may result in falling out to people, or indeed result in death, as it was for those two martyrs, and indeed perhaps acrimony. But as long as we're graceful in how we disagree and how we proclaim the Christian faith, that is something that we need to do. Indeed, at other times we also think about martyrs in other contexts. People think about martyrs and missionaries being in foreign lands, and indeed some of them are, but we do have to remember that these people, Christian people, are still being martyred today. We think about Israel, Palestine and the Middle East. We think about the persecuted church in other places. We think about China and other kinds of countries. And we do remember this is not something that's happened in the past. And indeed it's happening to us today. Christian people are getting ridiculed, are losing their jobs, are losing their reputation because the whole mainstream Christian beliefs, which are still valid now as they were 2,000 years ago. People say we should move with the times, and indeed culturally we should move with the times in terms of how we present the gospel, but the actual truths of the gospel are there for all times. No matter how hard it is to follow, we will all fail, we will all fall short of God's ways, but God commands us to be able to follow his commandments, and indeed we will be blessed. And although these two ladies, the two Margarets, lost their lives, they do give us an example which will never be forgotten about how to put Jesus first, and indeed how following Jesus can be costly. But ultimately, when we follow Jesus, even if we are faithful unto death, we will receive that crown of life which no one can take away, and that of being united with the Lord Jesus in these heavenly places. So as we think about International Women's Day, let us think about those women who were marginalised in the past and are still marginalised today, but let us also look at Christian women and their examples, but also look at those who gave up their lives for their faith. May we indeed be humbled by them, maybe also embarrassed in how little we do, but also take encouragement into how these women set an example for us. May God bless us in this weekend.